Commander Sarah Mitchell sat in the diplomatic chamber of Station Omega and felt the weight of extinction pressing down on her shoulders. The massive windows showed Earth floating in the distance, a blue marble suspended in the void. Somewhere down there, 9 billion people were sleeping, unaware that their existence had just been measured and found wanting. The Galactic Council representatives had delivered their verdict 1 hour ago. Sarah had replayed their words 1,000 times in her mind, searching for any hint of hope in their cold pronouncement. "The collective will arrive in 14 days, the diplomat had said, his translucent form rippling with what might have been amusement. "They have destroyed 17 systems. Your planet will be the 18th unless you can defend it. The Council offers you a choice." Sarah had leaned forward. A choice meant options. Options meant survival. "You may submit to authority, as most species do," the diplomat continued. "Or you may attempt to build a defense fleet. We have provided materials to assist you. Salvage from destroyed vessels, scrap metal, broken components, engineering waste from 100 worlds." Then the head made a sound that Sarah's translator interpreted as a laugh. It was not kind. "We doubt you will succeed," the diplomat said. "Your species has been in space for only 300 years. You lack the sophistication for such work, but you are welcome to try. Failure builds character." The materials had arrived 6 hours later. Massive cargo vessels had dropped thousands of tons of twisted metal, shattered circuits, and unknown components into high orbit around Earth. The displays showed the scrap spreading across the space lanes like garbage. Now Sarah stood in the observation deck with Dr. Harrison, Earth's lead engineer. Was 53 years old and had the weathered look of someone who had spent his entire life solving problems with limited resources. His eyes were fixed on the floating debris field. "It is not scrap," said without preamble. He had known what Sarah would think. He always did. "It is insulting packaging for something valuable." Sarah turned to look at him. "Explain." "They are warriors," said. "They conquer through force. They do not build, they take. Everything in that debris field came from civilizations they destroyed. It is the best technology from 100 different species. The Council thinks we lack the sophistication to use it. They think we will fail." His jaw tightened. "They are wrong. We do not think like them. We do not build in straight lines following established protocols. We improvise, we combine. We take ideas from one field and apply them to another because we grew up on a harsh world where survival required constant adaptation." Sarah looked back at the blue marble of Earth. Was right. Humans had learned to thrive in places where other species would collapse. They had climbed mountains, crossed oceans, survived deserts. They had taken fire and stone and built civilizations. They had taken scraps of knowledge and built space programs from nothing. "How long?" Sarah asked. 14 days to build a warship," laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Impossible, completely impossible." Sarah's heart sank. "We can do it in 12, added. "Maybe 11 if we push hard enough, maybe." The command center of Station Omega became the hub of humanity's desperate effort. Sarah assembled the best minds from Earth and the orbital colonies. Dr. Harrison ran the engineering section. Maya, a systems engineer from the Luna station, worked beside him. Doctor from Tokyo coordinated the computational systems. Colonel James Edwards, retired from the Earth Defense Force, began planning combat tactics that had not been written yet. Had the scrap analyzed piece by piece. Each component was cataloged, tested, and evaluated. The Council had not lied about the source materials. These were genuine advanced technologies, each one revolutionary in its own way. "The problem," explained to his team on the second day, "is that these components were never meant to work together. The use targeting systems, energy cores, hull plating, each technology is excellent in isolation. Together, they should fail catastrophically. So we do not use them together," Maya said simply. She pulled up a schematic on the holo display. "We use them wrong, on purpose. We combine them in ways that violate every established engineering principle." Stared at her, then he nodded. "Humans do this naturally," Maya continued. "We take aspirin and combine it with caffeine. We take petroleum products and turn them into thousands of different things. We look at a failing system and ask, what if we broke it differently? That is what we do. That is our advantage." Over the next 3 days, the team began their work. They did not follow standard engineering protocols. They could not afford to. Instead, they broke the alien technology into component pieces and began reassembling it based on human engineering intuition rather than alien design philosophy. The targeting system did not integrate smoothly with human fire control computers. So they built an interface that functioned like a human nervous system, translating signals in real time through adaptive algorithms that learned as they operated. The energy cores were designed for slow, steady power distribution. Humans needed rapid fluctuations and adaptive responses. They modified the cores using techniques derived from studying how human muscle fibers respond to demand. The cores began to function like biological systems, adapting to load changes with terrifying efficiency. Colonel Edwards watched the construction progress and began assembling a combat plan based on what he saw. Human pilots were faster at making intuitive decisions than most alien species. They could be reckless because they possessed an unusual quality in the galaxy, a genuine willingness to accept risk when survival demanded it. "We cannot win through convention," he told Sarah on the fourth day. "They have conquered through overwhelming force and superior technology for centuries. They expect us to hide, fortify, and wait for inevitable defeat. We will do the opposite. We will attack." "With an untested ship?" Sarah asked. "With everything we have," Edwards replied. "Because showing fear is the fastest way to die in this scenario. Showing strength, even if it is built from scrap and held together by improvisation, might give them pause." Sarah knew he was right. She authorized the work to continue around the clock. The construction yards burned with activity. Thousands of workers assembled, modified, and tested the components. The new warship began to take shape, a vessel unlike anything the galaxy had ever built. It was part alien, part human, entirely unprecedented. On the 10th day, Doctor completed the adaptive combat algorithm. It was not like other ship computers. It learned. It evolved. It responded to situations by generating new tactical approaches rather than executing pre-programmed responses. The algorithm required constant human input, human intuition, and human willingness to make decisions that violated protocol. "It is beautiful," said, watching the algorithm run through its first real-time scenarios. "It thinks like a human mind but processes like a machine mind. They have nothing like this. Their computers are efficient, but they are not alive. This is alive." Shipyard became a place of controlled chaos. 10,000 workers from Earth and the orbital colonies moved with purpose that bordered on desperation. Every person understood what failure meant. There was no pressure greater than that. There was also no motivation greater. Dr. Harrison stood in the fabrication center and watched Maya run tests on fused metal samples. The metals should not combine. According to every established principle in the galaxy, what they were attempting would fail. The materials would fracture, separate, or explode under the stress. Maya pulled another test sample from the fusion chamber. The metal glowed with residual heat, displaying a color that should not exist. It was stronger than any individual component, lighter than the combined weight suggested, and it had flexibility that no alien alloy possessed. How asked? "We used carbon chains bonded with crystalline lattice structures infused with rare earth elements from Earth's crust," Maya explained. She placed the sample under stress testing equipment. "The aliens never thought to combine materials from different chemical bases this way. They work within established periodic table categories. We did not. We took elements that should not work together and forced them to cooperate." The sample bent under the test pressure, then snapped back to its original shape. It did not shatter, it did not crack, it adapted. "Humans look at problems differently," Maya continued. "We see systems and think about how nature combines them. Biology taught us that incompatible elements often create stronger unions when properly integrated. The aliens think in terms of engineering rules. We think in terms of survival patterns." The hull plating began to arrive in the assembly bay within hours. Each section was welded using techniques that violated standard practices, but worked because humans were willing to experiment. Some welds were submerged in liquid nitrogen before cooling. Others were exposed to extreme heat cycles. Still others were treated with biological processes derived from Earth microorganisms that team had brought into space. Colonel James Edwards watched the ship take shape and began formulating combat doctrine. He worked with the pilot they had selected for the endeavor. Was 32, sharp-minded, and possessed the rare human quality of remaining calm under conditions that should produce panic. "They expect conventional warfare," Edwards explained, showing tactical simulations. They attack in formations, they concentrate overwhelming firepower, they move in predictable patterns that have worked for centuries. We cannot beat them through their rules. What are our rules? Asked. We make them as we go, Edwards replied. We move unpredictably. We retreat when they expect advance and advance when they expect retreat. We use our ship's unique configuration to do things their vessels cannot do. Their weapon systems track targets that move in expected patterns. Our ship will move in impossible patterns. Doctor worked in isolation, developing the adaptive combat algorithm with assistance from a team of human AI specialists. The algorithm was unlike anything the galaxy had seen because it was based on human neural patterns rather than logical hierarchies. Traditional galactic AI operated through decision trees. Input reached the system consulted its programming, and the system provided output. It was efficient and it was predictable. Its algorithm learned. It observed outcomes and generated new approaches based on pattern recognition that went beyond simple logical analysis. It made intuitive leaps. It took risks. It failed sometimes and learned from those failures. In many ways, it thought like a human brain. The issue is control, one of its team members said. This algorithm is too adaptive. It might make decisions we cannot predict. That is the point, replied. Though we'll not be able to predict it either. We are not building a weapon that executes perfect strategy. We are building a weapon that evolves strategy in real time based on outcomes. That is something they have never encountered. The Endeavor's sensor array was another place where human unconventional thinking proved revolutionary. The standard approach in the galaxy was to build sensors that gathered data and transmitted it to a central processing point. The human approach was different. They distributed the processing throughout the ship's structure. Thousands of small sensor nodes communicated with each other, creating a distributed network that functioned like a living organism rather than a machine. If one node was damaged, others compensated. If the system encountered something unexpected, thousands of microprocessors simultaneously analyzed the problem rather than a single central computer attempting to process everything sequentially. It is biological thinking applied to machines, explained to Sarah during one of their briefing sessions. Life on Earth taught us that decentralized systems are stronger than centralized ones. A single brain can be damaged. A network of brains, each capable of independent function but coordinated through communication, is nearly indestructible. By the 8th day, the primary hull sections of the Endeavor had been assembled. The ship was beginning to look like a vessel rather than a construction site, but its appearance was startling. The hull was asymmetrical. One side incorporated plating with its aggressive angles. Another section used materials with their smooth curves. A third section displayed the crystalline lattice structures that were uniquely human. The ship looked wrong. It looked like it had been built by accident or by builders with no understanding of design principles. It looked dangerous in a way that alien warships, with their clean lines and symmetrical structures, never did. It looks like violence given form, said when he saw it for the first time. He was smiling. The weapon systems integration began on day 9. Again, the human approach departed radically from established practice. Conventional warships had weapons that operated independently. A weapons officer would select a target and fire, knowing that the weapon would follow its programming. The human weapons were different. They were integrated with the adaptive algorithm. When pulled the trigger, he was not simply firing a weapon. He was suggesting a target, and a weapons system that had learned from every previous engagement would select the best approach based on real-time conditions. Some of the engineers from allied species working in the construction yard watched this development with deep unease. What they were seeing violated every rule of safe weapons systems design. Weapons should be controlled through clear command structures. They should never be trusted to make independent decisions. But his team understood something the aliens did not. Humans had fought humans for using weapons that required split-second decision-making. Human brains were wired for combat intuition. Giving humans and machines a unified system that allowed intuition to guide technological force was not dangerous. It was natural. On day 10, Maya made a discovery that changed everything. She found a biological component among the salvage materials. It was not alive, but it had been alive. It was a neural interface device created by a species that had combined organic material with mechanical systems. "We can use this," she told, excitement in her voice. "We can create a direct neural interface for the pilot, can think commands and the ship will respond. He will not operate the Endeavor like a machine. He will operate it like a body part." Looked at the organic component with concern. Then he understood. Think in terms of pilot and machine, separate systems that communicate through slow interfaces. We would merge them. "We would make the pilot and ship one unified system," Maya confirmed. "The response time would be microseconds instead of milliseconds. The integration would be perfect. It is exactly the kind of thing no alien species has done because they view organic and mechanical systems as fundamentally incompatible." Over the next 72 hours, the Endeavor transformed from a mostly complete hull into an operational warship. The neural interface was installed. The adaptive algorithm was loaded into the distributed processor network. The weapons systems were activated. The propulsion systems, jury-rigged, the Endeavor left the safety of orbital construction yard exactly 72 hours before the main fleet was scheduled to arrive. Commander Sarah Mitchell made the decision herself, knowing it would be questioned by every military strategist in the Galactic Council. Standard doctrine demanded that new warships be held in reserve, protected by established defenses, saved as a final weapon for desperate circumstances. Sarah rejected standard doctrine. She ordered the Endeavor to patrol the outer regions of the system, actively searching for the 3 scout vessels that had been detected moving ahead of the main fleet. The Galactic Council representatives registered formal protest. The humans were ignoring the advice of species with thousands of years of military experience. This would end in disaster. Captain sat in the neural interface chair, the organic connection between his consciousness and the Endeavor's systems humming with potential. His mind felt expanded. He could sense the ship's position in space the way he sensed his own body. He could feel the weapons systems like extensions of his limbs. The integration was total and seamless, and in every moment of it, he understood why they had never attempted this kind of union. Organic consciousness and mechanical systems were meant to remain separate, according to every established principle. The integration would be unstable. It would produce unpredictable outcomes. It would be impossible to control. Except humans had evolved on a world where the unexpected was the only constant. Their brains were wired for adaptation. Their neural patterns could match with mechanical systems in ways that seemed impossible to species that thought in rigid hierarchies. Felt the Endeavor's engines respond to his desire for speed. He felt the weapons systems ready themselves. He felt the adaptive algorithm activate in the back of his consciousness, a presence that was both separate from him and integrated with him simultaneously. "Contact," Doctor's voice came through the communication system. He was monitoring the algorithm from the ship's command center. 3 signatures moving on intercept course. They are attempting to close within weapons range. Moved the Endeavor forward, not backward. This was the first human tactic that would confuse every species they had encountered retreated from superior numbers or stayed at defensive range. Humans did the opposite. When facing multiple enemies, humans advanced. The Endeavor rolled. To an outside observer, the movement made no tactical sense. The ship's sensors would be disrupted. Its weapons angle would be compromised. Its defensive posture would be weakened. But was not thinking like a conventional pilot. He was thinking like a human fighter that had learned to use unexpected movement to create openings. He was thinking like an acrobat using momentum against expectation. The targeting systems locked onto the Endeavor. 3 vessels fired simultaneously, projecting coherent energy bolts with enough power to destroy a conventional warship instantly. The Endeavor's hull, that impossible combination of alien materials fused through unconventional processes, absorbed the strikes. The energy redistributed through the crystalline lattice structures, dissipating into the ship's power grid rather than causing structural failure. Where conventional armor would have melted, the human-designed hull adapted and held. "Return fire," commanded, but he did not simply instruct the ship's weapons system to duplicate his order. He allowed the adaptive algorithm to decide how. The Endeavor's weapons systems selected firing angles that violated every principle of direct combat. They fired while the ship was spinning. They fired around obstacles that should have blocked the shots. They fired in patterns that made no strategic sense but created a delivery vector the targeting systems could not predict or counter. One vessel took the barrage directly. Its shields, designed to block straight-line energy attacks, failed against the unconventional assault pattern. The blast struck the ship's engine section and sent it careening sideways through space. Vessel damaged, reported. Shield integrity compromised, propulsion systems showing failure cascade. Pulled the Endeavour up and to the side, another movement that made no conventional sense. The pilots expected him to continue the attack on the wounded vessel. Instead, he was placing the Endeavour between the damaged ship and the two healthy ones. They are transmitting distress signals, said. Long range, directed toward their main fleet. This was the moment had been waiting for. He had learned in Colonel Edwards' combat simulations that the valued collective strength over individual sacrifice. If their scout vessels seemed to be in danger, they would send every available resource to assist. They would not leave their own to die, even when it meant altering their strategic timeline. The Endeavour accelerated toward the main fleet approach vector, forcing the two intact vessels to follow or abandon their damaged companion. They chose to follow, moved the Endeavour in ways that seemed designed to trap all three vessels in a conflict scenario, making it impossible for them to flee without risking their damaged comrade. For 7 minutes, the engagement lasted. 7 minutes of human intuition and alien technology merged into something that neither species had ever created alone. 7 minutes of the Endeavour treating space like a fighter that understood leverage and momentum. Then they did something unexpected. They signaled surrender. Not true surrender, but a tactical retreat. The three vessels broke engagement and accelerated away, heading back toward their main fleet with maximum speed. In that moment, something crucial happened. They sent their distress transmissions not to their fleet, but across the communication networks where every spacefaring species could receive them. Their message was unguarded, honest, and devastating to their reputation as conquerors. Unidentified warship employs tactics never encountered. Unknown technology configuration. Recommend immediate fleet concentration before engaging. This is not conventional warfare. This is not predictable. Heard the transmission and understood what had just occurred. They had not destroyed the vessels, but they had done something far more valuable. They had shown uncertainty on communication channels. They had introduced doubt into the mind of the galaxy's most feared military force. Commander Sarah Mitchell received the transmission in Station Omega's command center. She allowed herself a small smile. In military affairs, doubt was sometimes more valuable than victory. Doubt was the seed of fear. Fear was the death of the absolute confidence that they had relied upon for centuries. The fleet changed course within an hour. Instead of maintaining their approach vector toward Earth, they were now accelerating toward the location of the Endeavour. They were no longer executing a planned conquest. They were responding to a threat they did not understand. The message from the scout vessels spread across the communication networks like wildfire. Within hours, thousands of species had received the transmission. Within a day, millions of civilian communication channels were analyzing it, debating it, speculating about its meaning. A species had survived firepower. An unidentified warship had damaged vessels and forced them into tactical retreat. The collective, which had never been defeated, had been forced to accelerate their timeline and concentrate their forces. For the first time in generations, doubt flickered in the minds of the conquered. The diplomat received Commander Sarah Mitchell in a diplomatic chamber aboard Station Omega. This translucent form rippled with colors that indicated genuine surprise. This was not an emotion that typically displayed. "You have changed the equation," they said without preamble. "We believed your warship to be a final desperate gesture. We believed you understood that resistance was futile. We were incorrect. You handed us scrap metal and expected us to build monuments to failure," Sarah replied. "We built something else instead. We built something that refused to accept your certainty." Within the next 18 hours, 3 allied species approached Sarah with proposals. The Theta Confederation, which had been under threat for 50 years, offered support. The Trading Collective, whose members had supplied some of the materials now forming the Endeavour's hull, offered their merchant fleet as tactical support. The known as the fastest pilots in known space offered combat assistance. "We believe humanity represents something different," the Theta representative said. "Every species that have conquered followed patterns we recognized. They retreated, they fortified, they accepted defeat. You did not. You created something without established precedent. This interests us." Sarah faced a critical decision. The Endeavor could remain a secret weapon held in reserve for humanity's final desperate defense. The ship could be protected, preserved, saved for the moment when Earth faced its last stand. Or the Endeavor could be revealed to all of known space. It could become a symbol. It could transform from a weapon into a declaration. The vote in Earth's council was surprisingly unified. Every human leader understood that fear was an economic resource in the galactic marketplace. Fear of the had kept most species compliant for centuries. If Earth could replace that fear with something else, the entire political structure would shift. Dr. Harrison advised caution. He understood that revealing the Endeavor meant exposing their only significant military advantage. If they studied the ship, they would learn to counter its tactics. Human engineering might be surprising, but it was not invulnerable. Maya argued for revelation. She understood that human survival depended not on hiding their advantages, but on demonstrating that those advantages were reproducible. If they believed the Endeavor was unique and irreplaceable, they would dedicate all resources to destroying it. If they believed the Endeavor was merely the first of many, they would have to reconsider their entire strategic approach. Sarah made her decision. She authorized the launch of 7 new warship construction programs. Each would follow the same principles that had created the Endeavor. Each would combine alien technology in unconventional ways. Each would be integrated with human pilots and adaptive algorithms. Each would be a weapon that learned and evolved rather than executing rigid programming. The announcement was made not through diplomatic channels, but through civilian broadcast networks. Sarah's message went out to every corner of known space, transmitted by the same communication channels that carried entertainment, news, and commerce. Humanity is not building one ship. We are building a fleet. This fleet will not be hidden. This fleet will not be a secret. Every species in the galaxy will know that humanity has not accepted the collective as inevitable. We are offering ourselves as defenders. Any species threatened by conquest can appeal to Earth for protection. We are offering this not because we are strong enough to protect everyone. We are offering this because we have chosen a different path than the one fear has forced upon the galaxy. The message electrified known space. For the first time in centuries, there was an alternative to submission. For the first time, a species was offering to stand against the not from strength but from choice. This distinction mattered more than anyone had anticipated. The response was fury. Their fleet accelerated further. Their communications became aggressive. They sent their own message to Earth, transmitted openly across all channels. Your defiance is noted. Your resistance will be crushed. Your entire species will become a lesson to any who consider opposing authority. We are approaching your world. Your warship will be destroyed. Your species will be subjugated. This is inevitable. But the message contained a flaw they did not recognize. They were addressing their message to Earth as if Earth was the problem. They were not addressing the 3 allied species that had now pledged support to humanity. They were not addressing the growing number of formerly conquered species that had suddenly seen an alternative possibility reflected in humanity's actions. Within 3 days, 8 species had formally joined an alliance with Earth. Within a week, that number had grown to 16. A defensive coalition was forming, not through military necessity, but through the simple recognition that humans had demonstrated something that had seemed impossible. They had demonstrated that they could be fought. They had demonstrated that they could be forced to react instead of acting from complete superiority. They had transformed the political landscape through nothing but a refusal to accept defeat. Doctor completed the 6th adaptive combat algorithm while the 2nd human warship, the Horizon, was still under construction. The algorithm had evolved significantly since the first iteration. It had learned from the engagement with the scouts. It had incorporated data if the engagement began at the outer reaches of the Earth system, in the cold void, where no previously recorded battle had ever taken place. 400 warships arranged themselves in their standard conquest formation. 3 human warships, supported by 16 species military forces, arranged themselves to face them. From a tactical standpoint, the odds were overwhelming. They possessed superior numbers, decades of combat experience, and a military doctrine honed through centuries of conquest. The humans possessed innovation, adaptability, and absolute willingness to risk everything. Commander Sarah Mitchell transmitted her final message to all Allied forces. We are not here to win in conventional terms. We are here to make them understand that surrender is an option. Fight hard, fight smart. Make them believe they have not won until they actually stop fighting. Captain sat in the neural interface chair as the Endeavor accelerated toward the formation. His consciousness merged with the ship's systems in perfect unity. He could feel the engines respond to his will. He could sense the weapons systems anticipate his needs. He could feel the adaptive algorithm evolving in real time, learning patterns and generating countertactics faster than any conventional military intelligence could operate. The first exchange of fire was devastating. The concentration of firepower was enormous. 3 human warships could not match the raw destructive capacity of 400 vessels firing in unison. But the 3 human warships did not try to match that firepower. They distributed it. They dodged. They moved in ways that made no conventional sense. The Endeavor took hits that should have disabled it. The hull deformed in places, absorbed the energy in others, and adapted its shield configuration to distribute impact forces. Where conventional armor would have failed catastrophically, the human-designed hull continued functioning, damaged but operational. Captain moved the ship in patterns that the targeting systems could not predict. He rolled through energy barrage. He dove perpendicular to incoming fire. He accelerated and decelerated in fractions of seconds, using the ship's unique construction to achieve G-forces that would have destroyed conventional warships. The adaptive algorithm worked in perfect synchronization with his consciousness. When they attempted one attack pattern, the algorithm had already generated a counter. When they adjusted their tactics, was already adapting to the new configuration. The Horizon, commanded by Captain Torres, demonstrated that the Endeavor was not unique. The second human warship executed similar adaptive maneuvers. It took damage that seemed fatal and kept fighting. It moved in impossible ways and survived. The Pioneer, under the command of Captain, completed the triangle. 3 human warships, each demonstrating that human engineering combined with human intuition could create something revolutionary. But the humans were still vastly outnumbered. Even with perfect tactics, 3 ships could not defeat 400 through combat alone. The Allied forces provided the element that shifted the equation. The Theta fighters, trained in evasion, targeted support vessels. The merchant ships, converted to battle configuration, disrupted supply lines. The pilots, moving with their characteristic speed, created chaos in the formation. They responded with their typical approach. They concentrated fire on the sources of disruption. They sent waves of warships to suppress the Allied forces. They attempted to eliminate each problem systematically. But they had been designed by centuries of conquest against species that thought in conventional patterns. They had no experience facing an enemy that was willing to sacrifice peripheral forces to protect the center. They had no experience facing species that coordinated through intuition rather than command hierarchy. The battle raged for 6 hours. The space became filled with debris from damaged vessels, energy trails from weapons fire, and the desperate maneuvering of combatants fighting for survival or conquest. Doctor monitored the adaptive algorithms from the Endeavor's command center. He watched the tactical systems learn in real time. With each attack pattern, the algorithm identified weaknesses. With each engagement, it became more effective at predicting and countering movements. The human pilots, through their neural interfaces, became partners with artificial intelligence that learned as fast as human intuition could provide guidance. It was warfare unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. The turning point came in the 5th hour of engagement. They had suffered significant casualties. 70 warships had been destroyed or disabled. Their formation was breaking. Their coordination was deteriorating. But more importantly, something psychological had shifted. The who had never known defeat began to understand the possibility of it. They had fought harder than any enemy they had previously encountered. They were winning in a traditional sense, inflicting more damage than they received. Yet they were not achieving the clear dominance they expected. Captain moved the Endeavor into a position that was either brilliant or suicidal. He brought the ship directly toward the command vessel, flying at it with weapons blazing. The concentrated all available firepower on the approaching human warship. The Endeavor took strikes that should have destroyed it. Its shields flared and failed. Its hull deformed. Fire erupted from interior sections. The ship should have ceased to exist in those moments. Instead, it adapted. The crystalline lattice structures redistributed the impact forces. The distributed processor network rerouted power around damaged sections. The adaptive algorithm shifted the defensive configuration to present undamaged areas to incoming fire. The Endeavour reached the command vessel and unleashed every weapon system it possessed. The concentrated barrage struck the command ship's shield generators and overwhelmed them. The strike that followed penetrated the armor. The command vessel's communications went silent. In the moment of that silence, something shifted across the formation. The unthinkable had occurred. The command vessel was disabled. Leadership was compromised. The supposedly invincible military force had been staggered. The alien signals began, not orders but something else. The Theta vessels were moving to surround damaged warships. They were repositioning to cut off retreat vectors. They were identifying escape routes and blocking them. For the first time in centuries, the collective faced a scenario where defeat was not just possible but approaching. They had felt pain before, in the form of casualties suffered, but they had never experienced the terror of actual defeat until this moment. The flotilla commander transmitted a message on all channels. His words were devoid of their previous arrogance. "This is collective command to Earth forces. Negotiations are required. We will accept terms of withdrawal if hostilities cease." The battle that had seemed impossible to win had produced something more valuable than victory. It had produced a negotiated resolution that every species involved could accept. 3 days later, they signed a treaty recognizing Earth's independence and the independence of all allied species. They agreed to withdraw from the contested region of space. They agreed to respect human territorial claims. They, for the first time in centuries, acknowledged equals in the galactic order. Commander Sarah Mitchell stood in the observation deck of the damaged but functional Endeavour. Dr. Harrison and Maya stood beside her, looking at the warships under construction in the orbital yards. 3 more human warships were approaching completion. 5 were in advanced stages. 10 more had been designed and were waiting for resources to begin assembly. "We built something impossible," said quietly. "We built something that refused to accept impossible," Sarah corrected. "That is the most human thing we could have done." Doctor entered the observation deck with data tablets showing the performance metrics of the adaptive algorithms during the battle. They had evolved beyond anything he had projected. By the end of the engagement, the algorithms were operating at tactical levels that approached true sentience. "The algorithms continue to evolve," said. "Each battle teaches them new patterns. Each engagement makes them more capable." "Will they eventually exceed human control?" Sarah asked. "Possibly," replied. "But that is not the question we should be asking. The question is whether humanity can evolve at the same pace, whether we can maintain the ability to guide intelligence that becomes capable of operating beyond our direct control, whether we can trust ourselves to do the right thing when power exceeds all previous experience." Sarah looked out at the stars, at the wreckage of the recent battle, at the orbital construction yards that would birth humanity's fleet. She thought about the scrap metal that had been delivered with the intention of demonstrating human insignificance. She thought about how that insult had become the foundation of an entire civilization's ascension to galactic significance. "We will learn to manage it," Sarah said. "Humans have always learned to manage power beyond our understanding. We took fire and built civilizations. We took electricity and built cities. We took nuclear energy and stepped back from the abyss. We will learn to manage AI that exceeds our comprehension, and we will do it because survival depends on it. We will do it because that is what humans do." The Endeavour prepared for return to Earth orbit. Behind it, the Horizon and the Pioneer made their final maneuvers of the engagement. Around them, the Allied ships moved into formation for departure. The battle was over. The impossible had been made possible. In the orbital shipyards above Earth, construction continued. Thousands of workers labored to complete more warships using the same principles that had created the Endeavour. Each ship would be unique. Each ship would combine human intuition with alien technology in unprecedented ways. Each ship would carry the message that Earth had learned a crucial lesson. When you give scrap metal to species that refuse to accept defeat, you do not give them a burden to bear. You give them the raw material to forge legends. The galaxy would remember this moment. The moment when a young species, barely 300 years into space exploration, stood against an enemy that had seemed invincible and refused to surrender. The moment when scrap metal became the foundation of a new age. The age when fear was no longer inevitable. The age when humans taught the galaxy that impossible was simply another word for something that had not been attempted yet. ROM 17 different battle scenarios. It had grown increasingly capable at anticipating tactics, because it was trained by humans who understood risk and intuition in ways that no alien intelligence could replicate. The shipyards worked with desperate intensity. 3 completed warships were now equipped with adaptive algorithms and neural interfaces. 5 more were in advanced construction. The materials that they had provided, believing humanity would fail, had become the foundation of a military capability that no one had anticipated. Commander Sarah Mitchell stood in the observation center of Station Omega and watched the fleet approach. 400 warships, the largest military concentration she had ever witnessed. They were coming to crush Earth and its impossible warship. They were coming to demonstrate to the entire galaxy that resistance was futile. They did not know that Earth was no longer alone. They did not know that 16 allied species were mobilizing their forces. They did not know that they were walking into a trap built from their own arrogance. They did not know that the age of their absolute certainty was ending. Sarah smiled and issued the final order. All human warships would depart for the engagement zone. All allied species would mobilize their forces. They would be met in deep space, far from Earth's orbital defenses, in a place where the battle would decide more than just survival. The battle would decide whether the galaxy would continue to accept fear as inevitable, or whether it would recognize that even the impossible could be challenged by species willing to pay the price for freedom. The Endeavour fired its engines and accelerated toward the approaching fleet. Behind it, the Horizon and the Pioneer followed. The age of human insignificance was ending. The age of human defiance was beginning. Sarah issued her statement to the Galactic Council through every available channel. Humanity is not seeking submission. Humanity is not seeking mercy. We are seeking something else entirely. We are seeking recognition that when you hand scrap metal to a species that refuses to accept defeat, you have not given us an insult. You have given us a weapon. You have given us a choice. And we have chosen to survive on our terms, not yours. The statement would be repeated across known space for years to come. It became the moment when the Galactic Council realized that Earth was no longer a young species asking for permission to exist. Earth was a power that had seized its own destiny. But in that moment, as Sarah made her declaration, the true battle was still ahead. They were bringing their full fleet, and the Endeavour was one ship against an armada. The odds were still impossible, but impossible was becoming humanity's specialty. And the galaxy was watching to see what happened when impossible species faced certain death and refused to surrender. OM components never meant to work together, achieved synchronization. Colonel Edwards ran final combat simulations within the pilot's seat and the algorithm engaged. The results were unprecedented. In every scenario where the Endeavour was outnumbered and it survived. In many scenarios, it achieved victory through tactics that made no conventional sense. The fleet was 3 days away. Sarah Mitchell stood in the command center and looked at the Endeavour through the viewport. It hung in space like a prophecy written in metal. It was beautiful and terrifying. It was exactly what humanity had created when given one choice and 14 days to live. The ship was ready, and despite everything she had learned about warfare, military doctrine, and the overwhelming superiority of the collective, Sarah believed the Endeavour might actually have a chance. The galaxy did not know it yet, but its age of fear was ending. A new age was beginning, and it would be written in scrap metal and human defiance. Sarah stood on the construction platform and looked at the emerging warship. Its hull was a patchwork of different metals and colors. It looked like nothing the galaxy had ever seen. It looked like a pile of scrap metal that had been welded together by desperate humans who had nothing to lose. 4 days remained until the fleet arrived. The ship was named the Endeavour, and it was ready to teach the galaxy that fear cuts in both directions.